Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the economics behind a system that has fundamentally changed how a billion people interact with money. I'm talking about India's incredibly frictionless digital payment system, UPI. If you've been to India recently, you know that the friction of paying for things has practically vanished. From a luxury boutique to a roadside vendor, you can send money instantly, securely, and seamlessly. It's a modern technological marvel. But, behind every effortless beep on your smartphone lies a much deeper, far more complex story of economics and massive scale.
To hook you right in, let's ask the absolute biggest question of all. Who really pays for free payments? Picture this. You're up in the mountains of Dharamshala and you decide to buy a small souvenir magnet from a local shop. You pull out your phone, scan a QR code, and tap to pay. It's instant. It's free for you, and it's completely free for the merchant. But building, maintaining, and scaling the infrastructure to process that seamless tap, that takes a massive amount of computing power, security, and customer support. If nobody is paying fees on the transaction, how in the world are these huge payment platforms surviving, let alone thriving?
What's really wild here is the sheer dominance of just two players. When we look at the third-party app market, the platforms you actually download on your phone, it's a massive duopoly. PhonePe and GPay completely dominate the landscape, together commanding over 3/4 of the entire market share, with PhonePe sitting in the lead right now. Yet, despite this scorching, absolutely unprecedented growth, they haven't started charging you, the user, a single rupee for sending or receiving money.
Part 1. The Mechanics of Zero MDR.
Okay, let's dive right into the mechanics of how this works, and more importantly, uncover the hidden costs of running these giant platforms. The big concept we need to grasp here is the merchant discount rate, or MDR. Traditionally, when you pay a store using a card, the store pays a small percentage fee to the bank or the payment service processing that transaction. That's the MDR. But for UPI transactions up to 2,000 rupees, the MDR is currently set at absolutely zero. This zero MDR policy is brilliant for getting small merchants to adopt digital payments, but it presents a huge problem for the platforms. They literally aren't making a dime on the actual transaction.
Let's walk through the exact flow of a single transaction to see why this matters. When you hit pay, you're initiating the payment via a third-party application provider, or TPAP, like PhonePe or GPay. Now, these apps don't actually hold your money. They just act as a user-friendly bridge. The TPAP instantly connects to the national UPI system, which then communicates with the payment service provider, or PSP bank. It's the bank that does the heavy lifting of securely transferring the funds from your account to the merchant's account. This incredibly complex, highly secure back-end operation happens in fractions of a second. It's a really costly exercise for the banks and the apps, yet the end user sees absolutely none of that friction.
So, who actually covers the cost? Well, the government of India. Look at this massive number, 2137 crore rupees. That was the government's allocation in 2023, specifically designed to subsidize the UPI system through incentive payouts. Because the MDR is zero, the government essentially steps in to offset the losses taken by the PSP banks. And because those banks heavily rely on the apps, the TP apps, to route this astronomical volume of transactions, the banks often share a portion of that government incentive with platforms like GPay and PhonePe. And this government backing is only expanding. Another 1,500 crore rupees has been added for 2025, specifically targeting low-value Beam UPI merchant transactions. This funding continues to grow because the government has a much larger goal in mind: financial inclusion. These incentives are squarely aimed at encouraging UPI adoption in rural and low-income areas. And it's a strategy that's clearly working, especially when you consider that UPI was the preferred mode of payment for 38% of young Indians in 2024. So while transactions are free for you, they are heavily subsidized by the state.
Section 2. The Scale Game.
But here's the thing. Government subsidies aren't a permanent business model for private tech giants, right? These apps are playing a massive volume game. They're hoping that sheer size will eventually lead to massive profits. When we look at the monthly statistics from July 2024, the scale is just breathtaking. In a single month, the system processed 14.4 billion transactions. The total value moved? Over 20.64 trillion rupees. The sheer volume of money and data moving through this ecosystem is rare to see anywhere else in the world.
And this number brilliantly illustrates PhonePe's specific scale. This one single platform is processing over 270 million daily transactions. When you annualize their total payment volume, it exceeds 1.5 trillion US dollars. I mean, when you have this much volume flowing through your pipes every single day, you don't really need a huge profit margin on every transaction to build a massive business.
Which perfectly leads us to this thought. Even a 1 rupee per user monthly monetization means 500 million plus in recurring income. These platforms boast 50 to 100 million active users each. Think about that. If they can figure out how to make just a tiny fraction of a rupee off adjacent services or little micro fees, those wafer-thin margins instantly multiply into huge, sustainable revenue gains. The goal right now isn't immediate profit per tap. It's completely capturing the market.
Section 3. The Pivot.
Now, relying on government subsidies while you wait to slowly monetize users is risky, which is exactly why we're seeing a massive survival tactic play out right now. PhonePay's recent moves give us a really clear glimpse into where this whole industry is headed. They are aggressively pushing to become a super app. They're diversifying into high-margin financial services like insurance, lending, and wealth management. They've even launched the Indus App Store, which is their own proprietary platform, featuring over 2 lakh mobile apps and games across 45 categories. And crucially, they're leveraging all that transaction data, within privacy norms of course, to drive cross-selling and deeply personalized offers.
However, we have to admit this pivot is still very much a work in progress. It is absolutely vital to note that despite this aggressive push into wealth management and app stores, the core payments feature still contributes around 90% of PhonePay's revenue today. They are in a massive transitional phase, trying to evolve beyond a business model that relies solely on those subsidized UPI transactions.
When we compare the duopoly, we see slightly different approaches to the exact same problem. While PhonePay is building a sort of walled garden of localized Indian financial services and their own app store, GPay is looking at a broader global playbook. GPay relies heavily on steady sources like bill payments, while expanding into adjacent global verticals driven by Google's broader tech innovations. Both of them, however, are on an urgent search for sustainable monetization outside of simple peer-to-peer transfers.
Section 4. The Road Ahead. So where does this incredible ecosystem go from here? Well, a major hurdle on the horizon is this number, 30%. The National Payments Corporation of India, or NPCI, has stated they want to cap market share at 30% per platform to prevent monopolies. If you recall, PhonePay and GPay together currently hold over 75% of the market. Enforcing this 30% cap could severely stifle future user growth for these top players, literally forcing them to maximize revenue from their existing user bases rather than just endlessly acquiring new ones.
To survive and thrive as those government incentives inevitably shrink, these platforms must execute on a few critical strategies. Their future growth drivers include aggressively expanding those financial services we just talked about, leveraging artificial intelligence for better data utilization, ensuring seamless interoperability across different payment networks, and tapping much deeper into offline rural markets. Tomorrow's winners will for sure be the ones who successfully evolve into full-suite lifestyle super apps.
And this brings us to a beautiful summary of the whole situation. What feels seamless to users is powered by deep partnerships and rapidly adapting business models. Ultimately, the massive macroeconomics we've just discussed, the government subsidies, the bank partnerships, the billions of data points, are entirely hidden behind the micro, everyday frictionless experience of you simply buying a magnet in Dharamshala.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to ponder. Can a zero-fee ecosystem actually sustain itself indefinitely? As the government eventually pulls back on subsidies, the ongoing debate about reintroducing the merchant discount rate for large merchants is really heating up. India has shown the world what a truly inclusive, massively scalable digital payment ecosystem looks like, but its next chapter is going to demand an incredible balancing act of innovation and economics. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a whole new perspective the very next time you tap to pay.